Okay, who can tell me what's after the inline lunge in the FMS?
Shoulders. This. Yeah. No? Oh, the step over. We already did that. That was the second
It's a trick
one.
question. So remember how I said we're going to go over the big three first?
Oh, yeah.
And then everything else?
Hurdle step.
Yeah, so we're not actually going in order, so we're going to hit up
That's right.
shoulder mobility.
Okay.
Hopefully we didn't go.
We didn't go shoulder. We didn't like when we went through it on the bar, but impingement in the shoulder.
Okay, let's brainstorm. What would you do for someone who has really shitty shoulders, mobility-wise?
Then pull apart.
A little. That's more kind of like active instability. Think more mobile.
Shoulder card.
Hell yeah.
Scapular cars.
Yes.
Retractions. Scapular retractions. Cat cows.
We've done this,
Cat cows?
didn't we? No, we didn't.
No, we just went over it when we were going through the board.
What else would you do for the shoulder, mobility-wise? Say hi to the camera.
Are you serious?
I just swore, so I don't know.
What else mobility-wise would you do with the shoulder?
You could do the quad, scapular retraction. No, scapular retraction.
Yeah, like there's so many different variations in
That's
this,
true, yeah.
right? Not really.
There's a hint where
Let's a hint would be like, let's go more into more active stuff that can require more stability and stuff like that.
The kettlebell one?
Arm bar, hell yeah.
Yeah.
kettlebell bottoms up.
What is that one? Oh, and you're laying down.
Really, you're on your side. I mean, I'm not doing it because I'm just saying it.
But you're laying down.
Oh.
Carries. And carries.
What else? That you can think actively for shoulders. Well, we said pull parts last time.
Whoa. Presses with the band.
What with the band?
Like
Face
pressing
pulls.
up.
Sorry, what?
Face pulls. Like going up or not?
You can, depending on the person, right?
Rows.
Okay. Cheers.
Yeah, you can definitely put in rows. O means overhead, just to, because it's like so like tedious to keep going.
Yeah.
Does this all make sense to you? No, right? Perfect. We're
No,
gonna
I've
go
done
over it.
some of it for my shoulder.
Yeah,
but not
100%.
a ton.
What's up?
Like,
Can I walk through here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on camera.
Get your own camera.
do you want for shoulder mobility?
Yeah.
What was that?
All the nuts.
Just love you, Raph. Just love you, Raph.
Love you too. You can also throw. Yeah.
Did you actually see this?
No, it's because like he's training me for like 2 years. It's like,
Hey, everybody.
Oh, what happened to me?
Sorry.
So like another thing too, if you watch all the other videos, like when we started doing this, what happens is like when we started with the overhead squat, a lot of these exercises keep popping up over and over and over again. So it kind of just shows how the FMS kind of breaks down each movement, like each assessment, and you kind of have things that repeat. And like I look at it, if there's an exercise that always repeats over and over and over again, that's probably really specific to that person that needs it. Any other ideas?
Hi everyone, this is Candace. It's her first time here.
Woo! There we go!
Okay, that is all.
We're just gonna cut through.
Okay,
Yeah,
no problem.
okay.
It's okay. These are our trainers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Are you gonna see me next time, Noah?
See you tomorrow.
You better. What class?
Any other ideas for shoulder mobility?
No.
So kettlebell pullover, you have a kettlebell in front of you lying on your back, and you're slowly like
Okay.
that. So we've had it in the classes, but everyone does it wrong,
Okay.
right? So
Paint down or wait.
not like that would probably make things worse, but pullovers. Essentially, when you get to that first point of resistance where you start feeling like you're shaking, that's where you should stop, because most people can't keep their rib cage down. So this goes back to the overhead squat, where do they have enough thoracic extension to actually do this?
Okay.
Right, so you'll see a lot of people in the classes, one, bend the elbows and arch and hit the floor, and then go back.
Okay.
Constantly doing this over and over again.
So
like
they're
that
on
for
their
5
back for this one.
Sorry?
They're on their back for that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then TRX wall slides. The reason why I like it, and it works really, really well for even people who have like sharp pain in their shoulder, is you simply get into a passive stretch with the TRX handles here, and then as you're pressing, you're kind of gliding your chest forward into more of a stretch and back down. And even if someone starts going and they're like, okay, I already feel pain in my shoulder, a simple solution is like go wider or go narrower.
Oh.
And every time I've done that with someone with like sharp shoulder pain, they can always find an angle of least resistance.
So that one's called the wall slide.
Yeah,
Okay, we have that in Wednesdays, don't we?
we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think most people also don't know how to do it properly, because I've seen people put like feet like this and they lean with their whole, right? So
Yeah, I was gonna say that is in Wednesday, but
Sorry,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel right.
yeah, so the reason why it probably doesn't feel right is if you have your whole body weight going onto your anterior capsule, it's not going to feel good. Whereas if you split your stance and now you don't have your whole body weight falling into it, and now you can actually push your chest into it, and now you get a full stretch across.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. What are we talking about now?
The TRX one is in the Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
It
thought.
was, I did it yesterday, but I probably wasn't watching correctly, but I felt like the feet were together. So when I went to do it, that's how I was attempting the stretch, and I didn't like it in my shoulders.
Yeah.
I
So
found
now,
it good.
imagine, because I always bring this back to like typical general population person that sits like this all day on a computer, and it's probably at least 60 pounds overweight, and now they're putting their whole body weight into this position. It's not going to feel good on their shoulder over time. And then most of the time, it's men who have a huge ego that won't go see somebody until it's so bad where they can't lift their arm, and then that's when they'll finally go see me and Sarah. So it's like, why don't you just prevent that and keep them going? So I always kind of bring this back into business. If people keep getting injured in the classes, eventually they get to a point where they're just going to quit and cancel their membership. So it's like, why can't we be the first line of defense to make them move and feel better and continue giving us money?
Yeah.
Really simple, right? Anything else that you guys can think of to throw into shoulder mobility?
Additional what? Shoulder.
Shoulder mobility. Or stability.
What about a lat stretch?
TGU for sure. And we'll go over that all different phases. Someone said something else.
I said lat. The lat stretch.
Yeah, I'll
Like
throw that
over
in.
the towel one? Or
Yeah.
T-Rex?
The other thing I was going to throw in, this is more if someone had really shitty shoulders. It's a stability ball figure 8.
Oh, with the hand.
This is like really like old school physio, but it works pretty well. So you take a stability ball and push it against the wall, and now you have to draw figure 8s with your shoulder.
Okay.
Right, and that's usually people who have like winging scapulas like all the time to teach them how to stabilize it. Anything else before we move on that you guys can think of?
Is there something you're looking for?
Not really, but you know what? I'm going to throw this in so I can teach it to you. The TRX pails and rails.
There's so much you can do with the TRX.
Yeah. For external, and then we're going to do also the sleeper stretch with pails and rails. So, does anyone know what pails and rails mean? No? So, it's an abbreviation for progressive angular isometric loading. So in the TRX example, I would get the person's shoulder into external rotation, and then the handle would be around the wrist, and they would go find a stretch into external rotation where it feels comfortable and hold it for about 2 minutes. And that 2-minute mark is kind of like the sweet spot to kind of send a signal to the rest of your body, to all your tendons and ligaments to relax. And I believe in yoga, you guys hold at least 2 minutes for a pose. It's the same concept, right? And then from there, you're gonna isometrically load progressively into the TRX handle as hard as possible. And from there, after the 10 seconds, you'll notice you'll be able to go a little bit further. So this is like PNF stretching. And then rails just means the opposite, regressive. So now I'm gonna take my wrist and try to push it behind as far as possible. So that isometric loading kind of strengthens the joint at its end range. So if at any time you were driving and you went to go grab something behind you, and I don't know, say a car hit you, because you've already trained that end range in your shoulder, it won't get injured. So if you take that concept into athletics, say a soccer player that has a high chance of rolling their ankle, so I would get that soccer player to get really comfortable into this position and do pails and rails there. So then when they cut and it's wet and they do this, it's not going to hurt them, right? So this is pails and rails is where it's at when it comes to injury prevention and basically making you bulletproof in any kind of athletic thing. Because that's when people hurt themselves, right? They take their joint through a range of motion they're not used to.
The mainly athletes you would use that for.
Yeah, but or everyday people. A good example of Rebecca from upstairs in head office. She did Tough Mudder 1 year, and she did the half pipe thing, and she ran up, grabbed it, but she didn't go all the way through, so she whipped her leg on top, and with her weight going down, she actually had a grade 2 tear in her hamstring. So now imagine if we did pails and rails for one hip flexion and having the straight down to the ground. So then if that did happen, nothing would happen, right? Be good? Questions, thoughts, concerns on this guy?
Lots of stuff for the shoulders.
Yeah, so we'll definitely go over all the exercises. I just need someone to take a photo of this. Oh, hey, Yasser, what's up?
Sorry guys, I didn't have a meeting.
On it. I already took it too.
Do you know what the shoulder mobility test is for the FMS?
Know what it is? No, I believe I did it.
Yeah, so really simply, you got two hands here, and then you're
I
just
didn't
doing
do
this,
that. Yes, that I did.
right? And then this would be all the exercises I would give to an individual if this was really crappy. But then all of these depend on what this looked like.
Was that the time you had shoulder?
Yeah.
You can still do.
So we took a photo of this, correct? Yes?
You got it.
Yeah? Yeah?
I got it.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I need to test again for the but it doesn't bother me as much. I just seeing them being a little bit too as well.
It's probably just doing the right things for you.
Yeah.
You know, not doing things that will aggravate it.
What does this mean? Active straight leg raise.
Oh, come on.
So, if someone had really terrible active straight leg raise, what would be kind of the first thought process of where you'd want to go to improve that? And remember, active straight leg raise kind of determines whether or not someone can deadlift off the floor safely and effectively.
What was the question?
Where would you start with an individual if they had a terrible active straight leg raise?
No.
I'm not going to answer it.
But exercise-wise, what would you want to do to kind of improve their active straight leg raise?
Stretch.
Hip mobility and strength.
Something to do with the hips, I feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
A one.
You want specific warm-up exercises?
Wait, okay, no. This is what I was concerned about. It's not so ignorant.
No, just.
But is it when you're laying down and would your core have anything to do with it?
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so in active straight leg raise, we're not only looking at the leg that's lifting, but the opposite hip, how it stabilizes, and how the core stabilizes in order to get this guy,
Good tie.
right? So 100%, this is where dead bug falls into place, bird dog falls into place, which we already kind of chatted about earlier too, I think in the overhead squat.
Half knee on 2 addition bars.
Yep. Half knee anything really.
Yeah. Turkish
Kettlebell deadlift?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think like less advanced.
Are you on core right now or do you want hips?
Anything.
Oh, well, 90-90.
Yeah.
For warm-ups.
90-90 would work.
What is that?
So the 90-90 position is this guy here,
Oh yeah.
right?
I saw a video of that. I tried to do that today.
What about this? Breathing.
Mm.
Most people don't know how to breathe, 100%.
Yeah.
So when I'm in the clinic, that's one of the things we always test. I get a simple test of one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest, and breathe, and right? So you want to teach them how to use diaphragm. So it's we've done it in the clinic where we test their active straight leg raise. It was terrible. We taught them how to breathe for 30 reps, retest it. It's night and day. And you're like, oh my God, who would have thought, right? And they think we're gods when it's no, just freaking use your diaphragm, right?
Yeah.
Because again, this goes back to your nervous system. If it's always kind of tense and redlining, and you teach them how to calm it down by diaphragm. Does anyone know anatomy-wise why your diaphragm makes you feel super relaxed and at ease? So there's a cranial nerve called your vagus nerve that goes from your brain, goes down through your trach, down into your diaphragm. So now imagine giving space to a nerve and then relaxing, giving space and relaxing. And now it'll send a signal to the rest of your body to calm down. So when I'm in the clinic, I'll always tell people that are super stressed that the one thing I want them to do is before bed, try to breathe for 30 reps, and they're gonna fall asleep so quick, right? And then most people can't figure out how to do this to breathe, so they're thinking about how to breathe and nothing else in their head. So that's if you just focus on one thing, you're gonna fall asleep pretty quickly,
I love this for yoga.
right? So it all starts with breathing too, and then that indirectly will also train pelvic floor.
What
Just
nerve was that, did you say?
The vagus nerve.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Right? Which we'll also get into, we'll do a whole pre and post meal thing in this as well, because that's super important. So, what else would you give a person?
Can you say,
Face to wall.
what was the thing with the pelvic floor that you were saying? How does it indirectly, how does breathing indirectly?
So,
do the-
breathing is the first kind of initiation step to core activation.
Right.
But to have it completely intact, you also need pelvic floor and diaphragm to come together to kind of create, they call it a canister effect. So in a perfect world, when your diaphragm expands forward, out to the side behind you, and pelvic floor rises up, you've now created enough intra-abdominal pressure to stabilize your spine, so when you decide to go pick something off the ground, you're not going to F your shit up, essentially, right?
Single leg deadlifts.
So a lot of, yes,
Sorry.
yeah. So a lot of times when I see women in the clinic that have had kids, I always ask the question, how was labor? And if they had a really long and hard labor, the last thing they should be doing is overly bracing front planks, side planks, whatever it is, because they've been doing that forever and they don't know actually how to relax their pelvic floor. So they're overly braced. So if you sent them to Diane Lee and Associates, where they hook you up to an ultrasound and ask you to turn on your core, and they overly brace, they have an incorrect sequence. So kind of similar to proper hip extension, it should be glute, hamstring, then low back, and not anything else. So proper core activation is transverse abdominis, internal oblique, external oblique, and then rectus abdominis. And
Okay.
usually what happens is the reverse. So now they have like an implosion effect, and now all the kind of shear force is going to go into weird things. And then people have like SI joint instability, they have low back pain, all because of pregnancy. But it's because they didn't have the education coming out of the pregnancy of what to do. Because most women will go to like mommy boot camps, and now they're doing a bunch of crunches because they want to get their tummies away.
Yeah.
But that can actually make things worse. So then you'll like hear a lot of times with moms like, yeah, I deal with incontinence for like the last 13 years, and it's like, that's not normal.
What does that mean?
They can't, they pee during workouts. So in the classes, if you ever like see a woman run off to the bathroom, most likely it's because they couldn't hold in their bladder.
That's why I
Right,
wanted
so jumping jacks,
Yeah,
running,
yeah.
broad jumps.
Yeah.
I even had a woman who did assisted chin-ups, and she's like, I pissed myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like, this is like, and it happens to like everyone. So like the stats are like, 1 out of 3 women have pelvic
Yeah.
floor issues.
Right.
So most likely, all the women that we train in there have some stuff, but they're too embarrassed to talk about it because they think it's like a weird taboo thing, but it's like, no, it's a,
Or they think it's normal. They think it's like
Yeah.
everyone's supposed to have that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you prevent that? Like.
so it all starts
how do you
with
prevent
an assessment of the pelvic floor. That's why I sent them to Diane Lee's, but now we're going to be actually getting a pelvic floor physio here starting next week, which is going to be huge. What's up?
That's awesome.
I only
love
interrupt
that.
once.
Yeah, so it all kind of starts from there, and then teaching them how to reactivate, their core properly. And a lot of times it's really difficult to kind of get that together. It's similar to like teaching someone how to breathe, but like the best analogy to teach a woman how to activate their pelvic floor is thinking of like,
Kegels, jading.
so not so much Kegels, that's like a little bit too aggressive.
Okay.
It's like you want to like, you only say this if you're close to a woman.
Yeah.
You want to think of pulling a single tissue out of a tissue box.
What?
My girlfriend just had a baby, and so she got the pelvic test done, and
Yeah.
they told her she's been doing Kegels wrong her whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. She's like, yeah, you pull up, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
How else do you do it though? Like, I don't understand how you could do it wrong.
So, and then for men, because men can have pelvic floor issues too, so a prime example, do you still not get it?
Like if you're to suck like a blueberry.
Wait, what was that? What was that? It's like,
Hold on,
like,
one dish and another dish box.
It's like that light,
Oh, with
that
the-
light, yeah.
Okay.
And then, a lot of times women will talk about this, but they can also get organ prolapse too, where stuff comes out,
Right.
right? And
That's scary.
like, it can even happen if they like sneezed.
Shut up. Will your organs come out?
Yeah.
Why?
So they have a special pelvic floor physio that has another specialty that only deals with prolapse. And they'll do assessments where they get in there too.
How dangerous is that?
Pretty dangerous.
Like,
Yeah. And then for men, they can also have pelvic floor issues in the sense of if you ever hear like, oh yeah, my husband has like constant hernias, right? A lot of dudes who play hockey, right, have terrible core, they'll get hernias, and that's because they don't have a strong pelvic floor. So for a guy, how I teach them how to get their pelvic floor on is like the analogy of you're walking into a cold lake, and you get the water like, that like, whoa. Yeah, that's the best way to do that.
everybody can relate to that. Oh my god.
So anyway, back to breathing. What else would you do? Okay, you said single leg deadlift, which
You
is,
reach, like, not weight.
so what would be like an easier way for the single leg deadlift while thinking of on the lines of like breathing and basic core function?
What's it? Regression.
Yeah.
Like a single leg glute bridge.
You're on the right track. So it would be like the hamstring drops that we do.
Oh, right, right.
So what these are, you take a red band or any kind of band, and you're lying on your back.
Oh yeah, we did those.
Slight bend in the knee, the band goes around the foot you're holding, and then the other leg drops. So
Yeah.
if you took me upside down, this is a single leg deadlift, but it's also teaching how to activate this to dropping the leg
Oh.
constantly. So it's an indirect way to teach your nervous system balance and core function at the same time.
And those aren't easy.
No, they're not.
Like most people.
And then that's when I would flip people over and do like a body and single leg deadlift. And then progress it.
Mm.
Anything else hip related?
Could you give those both in the same warm up?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Anything else? Or everyone's just thinking about pulling their vagina out.
It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
That was
Nicole was like looking at Camille going,
he's like trying
like,
it.
she didn't know it. Like she knew it meant. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You did not think this was going to be
Yeah, no,
right?
right?
Way back.
You're gonna want to come to all their meetings.
Yeah.
So what did you learn on your first day? Wow.
Where are we at now? What are you asking?
Hip flexor stretch. Right? Hip cars.
I was gonna say the cars.
Half meal one. Okay.
Kind of, not really.
Okay.
Is hip car this one, the one with the leg right there?
Yes. Anything else?
Every demonstration, by the way.
Anything else that you guys can think of?
Oh, more active for like leg spins.
Not really.
It's not core activated.
Unless they weren't holding on to it.
I'd also throw in like any hip mobility exercise.
Oh, I could have said that. Any.
Something as simple as like a single leg balance. Right? Most people can't do this for a minute without falling over. That's a test in SFMA on the clinical side. And most people fall over within 10 seconds. And there's like studies showing that if you can't do this for a minute, you have a really high chance of like dying early.
What?
Right?
Why?
Well, think about if you were like 60 years old and you fall over all the
Yeah.
time and you can't get up,
Yeah.
right? So it's like you can literally like, if I had an older person, I'm like, this is the first thing we're gonna do. Time it 30 seconds aside and just
Yeah.
you just watch him like, oh my god,
Maybe
right?
people in the half meal position.
Yeah, and like the half meal like is gonna be money for a lot of this stuff, but let's move on to the next thing we'll get into. Someone take a photo. I'm sorry.
On it.
Any questions on all of this so far?
Are those in like priority sequence?
No, not
Okay.
at all. We're just like
I didn't
brainstorming
think so.
together.
So would you, when you program like templates for your warm-ups, you would try to pick the top priority stuff at the beginning? Of course.
So based on that question, like, does it really matter? Probably not. If you want to do it that way, sure. I like to make warm-ups where it's either the person starting on their belly or their back, and then we work themselves up,
Yeah.
right? So it's almost like rerouting the brain and software of how you developed as a child, right? So it's like literally every kid starts on their back, they roll over, they're on their hands and knees, they're in a half kneel position, they decide to walk and go. So you can almost go with the same concept as creating a warm-up that way. And that's basically the whole premise of the FMS. And another course that I still want to take, it never comes out this way, and it's usually international, it's the DNS courses, and it's all based on childhood development and how to translate that into exercise.
Well, cool.
Yeah. Okay, the T push-up. What would you program exercise-wise to improve the T push-up in the FMS? Do you remember what the T push-up is? So essentially you have your hands a lot higher than a regular push-up, and all in one motion you would come up. So think of what is required in order to do a push-up extended like that.
Is that even healthy?
We do
It
want
depends.
Yeah.
It depends.
Why?
Why are you asking, is it healthy?
Because when you're loading forward, like they always like for mountain climbers, you know, you're always supposed to stack and stay
Yeah.
stacked for a lot of things. So.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what is it trying to test for? It's asking the body if it can turn on its core while challenging extension, right? Like, I wouldn't give that to anybody to like put in their program unless like their goal was to do really crazy calisthenic body weight movements, right? Or you have a really strong person that's been training with you for years and followed every single piece of advice you've ever given them, and they're like a freak of nature and they're stronger than you. Then you got to come up with like stuff that's going to challenge them. So this is going to be like more of a fun one if you start thinking about what is required in order to do something that's that challenging.
Well, it takes a lot of spine stability.
Front plank would be a good place to start. But now think of someone who was really bad at that, and like their low back was sagging. What's like easier than a front plank? Emily should know this.
What's easier than a front plank?
Yeah, that would be similar to the
Oh,
front
small
plank.
plank.
Yeah.
What kind of plank?
I passed.
Sprawl plank. Oh,
Nice.
barefoot.
That's easier?
That's barefoot.
Well, of course, because you're limiting the lever length, right? Like,
Right,
this
so
is
imagine if someone like in the T push-up, like had their low back sagging and they're like, yeah, that didn't feel good on my low back, and you give them a front plank, they don't know how to stabilize this, so after a while they're gonna start looking like this. Whereas if you cut the lever length like Emily said in half, this is a lot safer for the low back.
I find very harder.
We got some serious stuff for
I know harder.
you can even throw in side plank.
But I've come across the only issue with the sprawl plank versus the front plank is if someone has bad shoulders,
Yeah.
you find it hurt, or wrists to be in the hand extension.
Yeah, so that goes back to like the entire FMS,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So if you know their shoulders are terrible, now you have to rethink what am I going to give them for
Yeah.
core stuff that's not going to bump their
But the
shoulder
other
in
stuff,
half.
yeah.
Anything else here? You can literally throw like any core exercise.
Like chops and loaves, carries.
TRX front plank. Atomic crunch.
What about hollow planks?
Hollow body.
Two
Rear
planks.
front planks.
Yeah. Body saw.
What's a hollow
The body saw or a
plank?
haul?
Yeah.
A body saw is like you'd be in a front plank with your feet in the TRX and you're pushing your weight back
Oh,
and
forward and
forward.
back. Okay.
Any rollout variation with the ball, ab wheel,
Oh,
anything
roll
like
out.
that.
Okay, okay.
A stilly ball, saw. What's the other one? Figure eights on the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, stir the pot would be easier. Any other extension, anti-extension exercises you can think of?
Anti-extension mechanic.
So say like a front plank, I am fighting extension, right? If I gave into extension, I'd like, or went to here.
What about actual push-ups?
Yeah.
TRX push-ups or
Any push-up
Elevated.
variation. So like you can tell that all this is kind of more advanced stuff based on the movement requirement for the T push-up. Like that's a freaking hard thing and most people can't do it. So now if you think about that, where most of the, like I've rarely seen a really good T push-up other than like a dude that was like semi-fit throughout his whole life. So imagine majority of all of our members are women, and then you put them through this, and they're like squirming up to get there, and now all these are in the classes, they're probably not doing them that well, and then we're building strength over dysfunction over time. They're like, why is my shoulder hurt, low back, head? Right, so now if you see how someone acts in the T push-up, now you know where they need on like the line of progressions and regressions of exercises, where they're at, get really good at that, and then progress them.
I think that's the big thing is strength over dysfunction.
Yeah.
People want that more, but don't realize that it stops them from getting the results they want.
Just like a good like
You only go, you
experiment
only push your body so far.
is the next time you're in a class, watch all the women doing push-ups, and just see the difference, right? And it's like they're probably just wasting their time doing like the knee push-ups, their butt up, and doing this, or even doing like mountain climbers with their butt up and like head down, like hoping that the 30 seconds is over. So it's like really they're just moving for the sake of moving, but over time they're gonna have issues.
That's why later programming needs to reflect not just like actual different exercises.
Yeah, so a good example is like when I do the FMS on someone and then create like the warm-up that's specific to them, by like the 12th minute of their warm-up, they're like, why is this so freaking hard? Is this my workout? And I'm like, we haven't even started yet, right? So if you actually pick easier exercises, but it's geared towards what they're weak at, they're not gonna know the difference, right? Like, that's why if you like look over when I train people, they're like, oh, that's really easy, but if I found an easy exercise that really challenges whatever your weakness is, you're gonna be like, fuck, this sucks. And
They're
you know,
actually not easier, they're harder
yeah.
for that person.
You ready to move on? Want to take a photo? I think we're almost done. What time is it?
All the time.
Yeah.
Wait, don't erase it.
Rotary stability, aka the bird dog. If someone was really shitty at that, what would you give them? And let's like think of really basic movements to start off. Yeah, that could work.
Or crawling.
Yeah, crawling would work.
Crawling. You would get them crawling.
Yeah.
On the floor. I have my client do that with me. When he goes in. Yeah. She finds it really hard.
So you literally get them going opposite arm, opposite leg. And then
So we do
most
a
people,
wow.
when I tell them go backwards, they're like,
They can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
like they literally can't.
We
like,
don't
think.
laugh, but.
And then they're like, why is that so hard? I'm like, it shouldn't be. And it goes back to like how we walk, opposite arm, opposite leg, every single day.
Yeah.
And I make that joke all the time that we don't walk like this. So why is crawling so difficult? And then if they have kids that are young, I'm like, your kid's probably better than you. Than
Because if you watch kids, they crawl, they like roll over,
Yeah.
deep squat. It's like
Deep squat. Yeah, they do.
they can stay in that position for hours.
Yeah.
You know that your kids, and they're bigger now. They're babies, right?
I think it's crazy that babies aren't born with, what part of their spine? Is it the third? No. Well, I think it's like one of the parts up
I think the
here.
cervical spine? I don't know, actually.
It's near the neck.
I know.
Yeah.
They're not.
I'm not in pediatrics, I'm sorry.
So, yeah. I won't grow into it.
So, okay, so.
Glute bridge. Why would I put the glute bridge in rotary stability?
I don't know why.
I know the answer, but I'll use it.
No.
Well, no, I want you guys know.
I talked about it earlier today too, and last time.
Because you don't want to extend, most people extend through their lumbar spine in order to extend their arm.
So when you're on your hands and knees in the bird dog, when people kick, they're like this every
You're
single time.
activating the glutes.
So it's like, let's teach them how to use their glute and not their lower back. So it goes back to like every girl on Instagram doing that through their lower back. They're like, why is my glutes not growing? So actually teaching them how to do a proper glute bridge and we'll go into how I coach it, because I teach it with tension, and basically mimic the deadlift. Alright, what else? Rotary stability. Just think of like what people screw up on in the rotary stability test. Think hip stability.
Yeah.
Well, they lean over to one side.
Yeah, the kid's opening it, so.
So you do
So
that.
half knee like a hip. All variations of half knee. What else?
Wouldn't hip cars be
Bird dog that we've done before.
hip cars against the wall be really good?
Yeah. See you later.
Alright. Thanks, guys.
What else?
This is bird dog though, rotaries. But you put it on there?
Well, just to reinforce that, it's like really appreciate.
So like that's why I put this, because there's ways to like coach it properly. And
Okay,
usually
so-
you end up being an asshole when you teach them how.
So just by cueing, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you want to know the cues?
Yep. We'll go into there. But what else would you do for rotary stability?
I'm just thinking. Can we get a clue?
Because if you kind of think about it, like the way we kind of started for the overhead squat, a lot has to happen, and our list was like super long.
Oh, it's
And then like as we started going through, like all the stuff that we already mentioned earlier is gonna fall into this bucket as well, right? So like honestly, we could probably
Copy it.
copy and paste, but like stop here, and then next time go through all the exercises.
Okay.
And maybe leave the last little bit of today in kind of like question and answer period. Any questions? Like FMS in general, exercise in general, stuff we talked about today.
That's a loaded question.
It is, yeah.
Wow.
But like next week will be really good because we're gonna go to the gym floor and go all over every single exercise.
I'm gonna go
That's
through.
awesome.
I'm gonna go through the video, like the recordings again, and then come up with some questions. I feel like I need to go over and see. It was the second time around what you read. Is there things you don't understand? And then I guess like this is probably more like going after, but after you like, so you've done the FMS, you have things you want to work on, you've done a warm up, and then 60 weeks you're changing it. Like, how do you kind of progress things? Are you progressing the warm up specifically, like exercises to like something that's harder, or are you trying to? How do you reassess where someone's at in order to like change their warm up?
So it depends, but I look at how people are moving after the 4 weeks, right? So it's like, say you're teaching someone how to hinge at the hips for 4 weeks. In an ideal world, your next phase would be like, okay, let's place a kettlebell, dumbbell, whatever in front of you and use that pattern we learned how to hinge and deadlift it. Or you might get a person where we call in our industry motor morons, where they don't know how to move. And you're like, honestly, another 4 weeks of you learning with the dowel, whatever variation, to push your hips back. Because you'll get a lot of people who just don't know how to move.
Yeah.
They've never played sports in their life. And when you tell them to push their hips back, they're like, I'm like, no, push your
Yeah.
hips back. And they still can't get it. And
So you
even
just
if you like push them in the right direction, they still won't get it.
Like I've literally like
Okay, so what-
physically like pushed people and they still
Yeah.
don't get it. It's
So what do you do for a person in that case then? How do you?
You just keep hitting them until they figure it out.
It's a
The big thing is like figuring out creative ways, and this is how what good coaching is figuring out ways